everyone, my name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I am very excited and honored to be interviewing a very special space champion, Mr. Bill Klanke. Bill is the co-founder and CEO of Space Intel Report, a subscription-based online publication focused on the commercial space industry. According to Bill, Space Intel Report focuses primarily on the business aspects of commercial space, targeted towards C-suite executives and other top decision makers in the industry. Bill has been around in the publishing industry for several years. His previous stops include the president of Space News, vice president and general manager for AOL, and vice president and publisher at Space News. He also held a leadership role at Career Builder, helping to take that company public in the 1990s. As you can see, Bill is a visionary leader in the aerospace industry who is incredibly passionate about all of his work in public policy as well as media. I'm incredibly excited to hear about his experience in the aerospace industry so far. So welcome, Bill. Thank you so much for taking your time to inspire the next generation of aerospace leaders.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and especially thank you for such kind words. I think, I'll substitute been around for a little while for a very long time. So hopefully I can be of some assistance here.
Yeah, I'm sure you have incredible experiences that'll teach us a lot, and definitely the upcoming students who are interested in what you're doing. So, to kind of kick off the conversation, could you first tell us a little bit more about how your typical day might run? I know there's usually not a typical day, but, can you tell us a little bit more about what you currently do?
Sure. So I think, as I mentioned to you, we're an organization that's only been around for about 6 years. We started it, myself and Peter. So we're a small company that has grown really fast and really rapidly. So as you mentioned, no such thing as a typical day, but I'll give you how I try to at least set the day up, right? As a small company, I wear a lot of hats, and my day starts early, and we're a very international company. 30% of our clients are outside of the United States. And so I'm on the phone quite early with Europe, beginning at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then go quite late. I actually have a call later tonight with some people in Singapore. So it will be tomorrow morning their time when we have the call at 9 o'clock this evening. So it's my day spans, but the thing that I try to do, and what I find so incredibly important, at least for me, is I really carve out the middle of the day where I'm not doing administration work, that I'm trying to be on the phone, talking to my colleagues, to my partners, to my clients, and really having that collaborative approach that I really enjoy and that I find so incredibly important in this industry, so incredibly welcoming in this industry. I've come to this industry a little bit later in my career. I was in the semiconductor industry and then information technology, all from a media standpoint. So when I joined Space News at that time, I was considering one of two jobs because my background is media. One was vice president publisher of Billboard magazine in the music industry, and one was in the space industry. So fortunately for me, I took Space News job and just fell in love with the space industry. Just it was so incredibly different than any industry I'd ever participated in. I started my career in New York, but was immediately transferred to the West Coast, where I was in Silicon Valley for 15 years. And so, dealing with primarily semiconductor companies at that time. And most meetings were always about, what's the exit strategy? What are we doing? It really wasn't about what the mission was. It was always about, thinking about how we were going to monetize that. And although that's incredibly important, what I found was so refreshing was, here's what we're doing. Here's what's so exciting about this industry. And you walk out of those calls and those meetings and those conversations with your head held up really high and go, man, I picked the right industry. This is just so cool. So I couldn't be happier that it took me a while to get to the space industry, but I'm certainly glad I'm here.
Yeah, thank you for that, oversight and insight into what you're doing. I think it definitely provides a little bit more perspective into kind of your career path. And, before we get into understanding, how you were able to grow Space Intel Report, could you first tell us a little bit more about the inspiration for founding or co-founding Space Intel Report?
Sure. So, I've been in the space industry for a number of years, and I had really seen for the first time, it really changed, it dramatically changed. And what I saw was, when I first got into business, you got into the business, you got into space to go to space. That changed. You got it in space to do so many other things. And it really became the business of space. And I'm fond of saying, that everyone talks about new space. Well, there's nothing new about space. What there is a new space economy, right? We're going to market differently. We're taking capital markets money. We're doing things that that are much bigger and a much grander scale. And we've learned from past experiences, and there are so many companies being so incredibly successful. And it's just so fun to watch. But as I was sitting at my desk, we were doing the things the same way. We were approaching the market. We were talking about things the same way that we had always talked about it. And I felt like we needed to talk about them differently, that we need to look at things differently, that it wasn't just about telling people about what happened. It was about, what does this mean? How does this impact? How do we look at this industry now as a business? What are those elements that we need to talk about? Where do we need to do a deeper dive? So it was really a reshaping of the way we were going to talk. At one point back in the day in print, you looked at things, and what you aspired to be was the voice of an industry in the business-to-business world. We wanted to be that voice. In today's environment, it's really, how do you shape and how do you be the promoter of that conversation? The medium lends itself to providing a conversation rather than just talking at the industry. You're trying to get that industry to have a discussion about things. And so I wanted to do things differently, and this was the opportunity to do it and the time to do it.
Wow. Yeah, and you said that Space Intel Report was there for only 6 years, which is a very short time. Yet there, from what I've seen, there's been great success. And I'm curious, what was this strategy or thought process into developing this idea and developing this business and growing it?
Sure, I think again, you look at you look at the legacy media companies, and they approach it from this horizontal approach. We're going to talk about Air Force. We're going to talk about NASA. We're going to talk about how many commercial launches, right? The budgets of Air Force, the budgets of NASA, and we're going to tell you what we're going to share with you what they are. We looked at it and said, hey, let's look at it vertically. And you do that because with a print publication, you have to find a way to close the business case. You have a major fixed cost there. With websites, it's much easier. It's easier to develop that website. It's easier to go to market with that website, and you can look at it vertically. You can own that audience and really do a deeper dive. So we look at it vertically. We right now we're only covering commercial space, but soon to be, hopefully not too distant future, we'll cover the other verticals and do it in a much more deeper dive and look at things differently from a data standpoint, rather than just the way it's been looked at for the last 100 years. So that was kind of the thinking from closing the business case. One of the examples I used with initial, going out to talk to people was, back in the day, Apple was a small little computer company that sold Macintoshes to elementary schools and to graphic designers, right? And then publications like Macworld and Macweek came out, and they help advocate. And I need to ride this really fine line here. I'm going to try to thread a needle. That may not be so easy, but they came out and they advocated for Apple. They weren't blind cheerleaders. They would call Apple out when it was necessary, when the products weren't good, but they also brought things to light and advocated for the industry. I thought we could advocate in a way by bringing things to the surface, conversations that hadn't been heard in terms of the finance of things, looking at end markets that we never did. This is an industry that talks way too much to itself at times. How do we talk to the end markets, the people we're serving, to new markets that we've never talked to, like the airline industry, the cruise ship industry? How do we now talk to them? How do we work with them? And so we're looking at that, and I look at that and I say, how are we at the forefront of that? How can we help that? How do we do that by bringing things to light here? And I'm very fortunate to work with Peter DeSeldy, who is the preeminent reporter in the commercial space industry. He's been doing it for I'm going to say over 30 years, but I think it's probably close to 35 years, and is just incredibly well respected. He was just elected to the SSPI Hall of Fame. And so, we look at that, and that's the foundation on how we move things forward. So it's always been my opinion as a media company in the business world, you should be as much part of that industry as any space company is. Our product just happens to be different, but we want to be as vested and interested and serve the industry just as much as anybody else. And so hopefully, that's aspirational, but hopefully we continue to work at that, and we continue to work, try to live up to that as much as we can.
Yeah, that is incredible. I did not, know about that vision before, and as well as your different approach in media. What makes Space Intel Report different, and just hearing about your thought process of approaching media completely different, I think is very inspiring, and it's very insightful, especially for those who are looking into what's the future of the industry. Where do we go from all these past successes we've had, and how much farther do we have to go? So that's very insightful.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, what advice would you give for young entrepreneurs who are interested in starting their own businesses, of gathering an audience, retaining audiences, and just really collecting that customer base?
Sure. I think, there are so many things. I mean, starting a company is really, really tough. It is really tough. And so I'll lean on a couple of things that I find important. There are things like you can't get too high, you can't get too low, because there are times where things are really great, and there are times where you go, what the heck what was I thinking about when I started this? Certainly my wife thinks about that every once in a while but what I would say, and I'll use a term here, or a phrase, you've heard the phrase, it takes a village, all right? It really takes a village to build a company. And I am so incredibly fortunate. When I joined this industry, like I said, I joined late, but people were so welcoming. I mean, people who were at the highest levels, giving me much more time than they should have, helping me through things, work through things, spend time with me. I just, the network of people who've been so generous with their time have been so available to me to sit and talk with. Is just amazing. So I have a strong network of partners, clients, and friends that have just been so incredibly helpful in terms of telling me when I'm right, and making sure that I realize that I may be made the wrong business assumption. But their advice and their input has just been so incredible. So I look at the top of the list is that it really does take a village to build an organization like this, and especially and fortunately for me, the space industry lends itself to that. I've been in the industry now for over 20 years, and it is just it took me a while to get to this industry, but I am certainly glad I'm here.
Yeah, I can completely attest to that fact as well, because I did not know anybody like 1 or 2 years ago in the space industry, because neither of my parents are in the industry as well.
Yep.
And I connected with every single mentor I have today really through LinkedIn or Twitter and social media. And they've been so giving of their time and connecting me with other individuals, and people like you who spend time, like a little bit of time in their busy schedules, just to give back and pay it forward. I think teaches me a lot, but also students, other students who are listening a lot. So definitely, the aerospace industry is very welcoming.
Hey, if you could point to one person, just think about what Chris Beauregard has done within a few short years. I met him through my son, who worked a summer job with him. And he reached out to my son, said, is your dad Bill Klanke? And he said, yes. And I met Chris at a conference in Seattle for the first time, and he paid his own way to go up there, and was just dedicated to trying to be part of the space industry. And it was just so impressive. And now to look back at, in that period of time, I think he did that. It's only been 5-6 years for Chris, and what he's accomplished in such a short period of time. And he's done that because of his tremendous talent, but he's also done that because of the relationships he's built. So it really has been, you can point to example after example of how welcoming this industry is, and I certainly want to pay that forward with with working with people like yourself and Chris, and anything I can do. I hope I will do it. So
Yeah, that's incredibly inspiring. And I have to ask the question,
sure.
were you ever intrigued by space as a young kid? I know you were mentioning how you got into the industry because this offer came upon and you chose it. And I'm curious, did you ever, what was the factor that drove you to that position? And did you have like some sort of curiosity with space growing up?
So I did, younger, I did. I mean, if be honest, if I had my first druthers, I'd be playing center field for the New York Yankees. But I could never hit the curveball. So that ain't going to happen. So when I was doing due diligence and I was looking at both organizations, I had a neighbor, Mark Daniels, who worked in the space industry, and his passion for the industry was unbelievable, and talking about how sexy this business is. And I remember joking with him, geez, Mark, you're getting old if that's what you think is sexy here, and he was just so passionate about it. It was just really just so refreshing and just so wonderful to see that I went to the next level. And then I got to meet with a gentleman named Lon Raines, who at that time was the editor at Space News. And he had the same enthusiasm, he had the same excitement, and he painted a picture that was just exciting, and what he and I could do together, and was incredibly helpful. In fact, there are a lot of people that have been significant to my success, but Lon certainly at the top of that list.
Yeah,
So,
and yeah, of course. And what another thing that I was thinking of is, a lot of times we look at people from the outside and we look at all their accomplishments and their passion for space, and it just seems so perfect. And I'm curious, did you have obstacles in your journey as you were pursuing this new industry that you knew was so exciting? And if you did, how were you able to overcome your obstacles?
I had a number of them. I joined, and I won't. I'm trying to figure out how I explain this without giving the company away. But I was really concerned. So I joined at an interesting time at Space News. It had been purchased by Space.com. We were going through a transition, and it had in the meet. So you had this incredible intersection of space industry going through an interesting time.
Mhm.
Media certainly going through an interesting time, major transition. How do you bring all those things together? And when I interviewed, I had a vision of how I thought I was going to move it forward, and joined and put that vision into place. Said, if this is the vision you believe in, this is how I'd like to move forward. And I'll make some changes here, and it'll be some dramatic changes. I'll add here. I'll subtract here. And we had some success. And then in 2005, advertising just fell off, just went away. And you look at the space industry and you go from an advertising standpoint, and there are not a lot of advertisers. So you lose one or two, and you can have a pretty rough year.
Yeah.
So we had to get through that. We buckled down, we did some things, but at the end of the day, I never lost sight of, and I used to have this up on my whiteboard. It's the content, stupid. Never forget about that. And so when you look at that, and as obvious as that sounds today, at that time where media companies were making major cuts was in content and editorial. They were cutting back their editorial staffs. They were aggregating content. And I always was concerned that if you did that, your product would become a commodity, that you'd have the same thing as everybody else. And we doubled down there. And the fortunate part for me was I worked for a gentleman named Dan Stone, who saw that vision, believed in that vision believed in where we were moving. And although that year was a tough year, it certainly, we got through it, and we came out stronger the other side.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's always important to remember the root cause and like the forward vision, regardless of the obstacles. I know it's very difficult to overcome them, but kind of keeping your vision in perspective and always believing in your abilities, I think is very important, and the team's abilities as well. And a lot of times, like I was mentioning earlier, we look at people's bios and we're like, wow, they're amazing. They knew what they were doing the whole time. But it's also really nice to hear that people might be going through similar situations or obstacles of their own that enabled them to get to where they are today.
if you look at it, probably outside of retail, no other industry has been impacted more than media, than from the internet, than almost any other organization. So we have gone through changes and different versions. So it's one of those things where you look at it, and I'm fond of saying, everybody likes progress, but no one likes change. And so how do you make those major changes and to continue to be successful?
Exactly, continuously evolving that vision of
Right.
what media really is like. And,
Yep.
media is a powerful tool, as we all know. It can bring a lot of new audiences into any industry you're writing about. And I'm curious, in your perspective, why do you think media is very valuable to the world we're living in today?
There are a number of reasons. As I mentioned, I think we can be the purveyor of that conversation. We can look at things differently. But media has interesting definition. Now you start to look at not only traditional media, but social media. So now you're engaging people where they may not have been engaged before through social media platforms. And so anytime you're engaged, and sometimes we think it's good, sometimes we think it's bad, but when you're engaged, it means you care. And so engaging people in this, getting that message out, not just from traditional sources, but from other sources, is so incredibly important. It's just so wonderful that that so many people are involved and talking about things where they were just it was one-sided. They were just reading about it. Now they're responding. Now they're not only responding, they're being proactive about that. Media, you look at what media is doing in Ukraine, social media is doing in Ukraine. It's incredible. So it's such a powerful tool to get the truth out. It's such a powerful tool to get information out in general. And it's a great way to engage people. And there's so many tools to do it in today's environment.
Yeah, and even from another perspective, I think media is a great way to inspire a lot of people to get into a certain industry. I know because of a lot of the commercial launches, there've been a lot more pictures of rockets on social media, and I know that's bringing and attracting a lot of new people into the aerospace industry, being like, "Oh, what's happening with all these launches?" So it's really exciting to see how the industry is growing because of media.
Absolutely, absolutely. But again, the definition of media needs to be expanded. A lot of that is the citizen reporter going out and doing things and bringing video to the market. So yeah, it's quite exciting.
Yeah, and because you've been involved in all these media sources and writing and obviously being in the latest news always, what excites you and what makes you nervous for the future of the aerospace industry?
What excites me is that it's actually happening. All
Yeah,
this talk, we are actually doing it. I mean,
yeah,
you look at what's occurring. It's just amazing that there's now becoming a regular cadence of sending people in the suborbital,
yeah.
sending people up to the space station. This is really unbelievable on what we're doing. And you would have talked about this, 10 years ago. People would have said, yeah, there's you can't close that business case. You're not going to do that. And yet it's occurring. So the future is so incredibly bright. Where we're going to be is just amazing. And space is leading that way on so many levels. And to be a part of that and to know people who are doing it is just incredible. So one of my first lunches, or my first board meeting, I should say, was with Neil Armstrong,
Wow,
who sat on the space.com board.
wow.
And I remember just walking in and just being in awe and barely being able to get sound out of my voice. And he was just the nicest, kindest man in the world. Just a true American hero. But
Wow.
now you see that, you see how that's evolved, how that's expanded, and there are more and more people who are going to be like that. It's just so incredible. It's just so incredible.
Yeah,
So
and anything that makes you nervous?
sure, I think that we have to open our arms in terms of the people that we're recruiting. There needs to be certainly more diversity in this industry. It looks still too much like me, and it needs to expand that, and that's occurring, but probably hopefully it will be faster, quicker, better. And there'll be more people like you who are getting the word out and bringing that, and people will see, younger people in there, and they'll say, hey, it's the old, if you can see it, you can be it. So hopefully you'll lead the charge. You'll be the next group to lead that charge to bring, different people into the industry, because it certainly needs that perspective, and it needs that view. So that would be I'm not sure, I'm worried about it, but I hope it happens faster.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you both on what you said about what excites you and what makes you nervous, or something that you hope to happen. I'm really excited that we're actually doing things. It's, out there, it's actually happening and it's real, and the progress is visible. And also definitely, I hope to continuously work towards that diverse ecosystem in aerospace, continuously make it more diverse and equitable for different students, younger students to be involved as well. A lot of times I say it's so important to start young, because you could never imagine how many opportunities there are for high school students to get involved in the industry, or there's never an age limit or boundary or any
No.
sort of limit to getting in the industry, and that's very, very exciting.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, and now that we're able to learn a little bit more about your journey as well as your interests in media and specifically the space industry, my last and final question for you is, what final piece of advice would you give for young students across the world who are interested in pursuing a career in STEM, media, really just any career, something you wish you knew when you were in high school or in college?
I think you just touched on it. Get involved early. There are opportunities. You may have to search them out, and you may have to do a little digging, and sometimes you may have to be even a little bit of a pest. But I wish I would have had more hands-on experience. I wish I would have understood. When I joined media, I wasn't even quite sure what I was joining in that time, because I had never worked in a media company. Had I done that, I think I would have had a leg up. So I would encourage people to volunteer, get involved, look at organizations. There's certainly a lot out. Clay Morey started a great group called Future Space Leaders that has provided scholarships and grants to folks. There are just a number of organizations, and certainly, my point about growing this industry, having it look a lot more inclusive, is not mine. There are so many other people out there who want that as well. So they're working hard to make that happen. So get involved. Get hands-on experience. Get whether it's volunteer or doing, but get hands-on experience. Get real-world experience.
Yeah, 100%. Just get into it. I think that's wonderful advice. I know that, last year I co-published a paper with Baylor College of Medicine alongside physicians, and I'm just a high school student who hasn't even, graduated high school at that point. So it was crazy to have that experience, but also I never thought that I could do it as a high school student until I just asked them. So that made me realize that a lot of young students can get involved in real research, in real work at a young age if they're interested. So there is no boundary. And I think your advice of just go get that hands-on experience is so much more valuable than just things you learn in school. So I want to thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
To add something? Yeah, I
No,
really
I was
had
just
a
going to
great.
say.
Yeah.
I was just going to suggest. I would just say you're just not a high school student. You're a very accomplished young lady. So congratulations on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good luck
Yeah, I
as you
had a
move forward.
Yeah, I really had a wonderful time speaking with you today, learning
Oh,
both about your journey and like your future vision for space. I personally have not explored too much of the media industry, but just hearing about what you're saying really, really excites me and makes me excited for the future. So thank you.
oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.